The parchment was warm against my fingers when I found it, ink still wet despite the fact that no living scribe had walked these corridors in 3 standard years. My name stared back at me in flowing high Gothic script, Interrogator Archivist Kalen Voss, Ordo Xenos, followed by details that made my blood crystallize in my veins. Personal histories known only to my confessor. Mission parameters I had never filed. And there, beside each entry, a timestamp marking our deaths 3 hours and 17 minutes from now. I am attached to Explorator Fleet Designation Theta Secundus, investigating the derelict research station Kronos Vigil that hangs in orbit above Prismaticus like a metallic corpse. The tomb world appears on no Imperial charts, yet bears unmistakable signatures of millennia-old Mechanicus installations. We translated from the warp 6 hours ago to investigate automated distress signals, speaking of temporal anomalies and chronological breach protocols. The air tastes of copper and ozone, heavy with metallic distortion that makes my teeth ache. Gravity shifts in subtle geometric patterns. 7 degrees left, then perfectly flat, following progressions that hurt to contemplate. The station's chronometers run backward, counting down to some primordial genesis, while our Vox communications arrive before we speak them, ghostly echoes preceding their source. Magos, I call to Explorator Hadrian Vex, whose towering frame of polished ceramite and whirring augmetics dominated the archive chamber. Analysis of this document. His optical mechadendrites extended toward the parchment, sacred oils weeping from sensor arrays as they processed impossible data. Temporal signature indicates concurrent creation with our arrival, his Vox grill rasped. Yet the inscribed data exists in our future. A causality paradox, interrogator. Skitari Marshal Kozlov Prime's red eye lenses swept the chamber with mechanical precision. Motion sensors indicate 17 personnel aboard this station. We number 5. His augmetic systems whirred as they processed tactical data that defied logic. Sister Hospitaller Seraphina moved with fluid grace, her white robes pristine despite the corrupted atmosphere. Atmospheric composition fluctuates between breathable and toxic in 7-second intervals, she reported, medical scanner beeping softly. Yet we experience no respiratory distress. From the shadows near a towering data spire, sanctioned Psyker Matthias emerged, his face pale and drawn. The neural collar around his throat sparked intermittently, struggling to contain psychic energies flowing in reverse through the warp. The Empyrean here is wrong, he whispered. I feel thoughts that haven't been thought yet, memories of events hours away. Voidsman Gunnar Thane kept steady hands on his lasrifle, despite sweat beading his forehead. The ship's astropath reported temporal echoes during approach. Vox signals from this station, dating back 47 years, all requesting immediate evacuation. The parchment listed us all with clinical precision. Kalen Voss. Termination. Curatorial processing. 1503. Hadrian Vex. Termination. Temporal hemorrhage. 1507. Sister Seraphina. Termination. Catechetic collapse. 1512. Matthias. Termination. Null implosion. 1514. Kozlov Prime. Termination. Override obedience. 1515. Thane. Termination. Decompression. 1516. As we watched, new entries materialized beneath our names, ink flowing like living blood. Deviation tolerance 3%. Specimens exhibit liturgical resistance. The unseen stylus continued its work somewhere in the station's depths. Scratch, scratch, scratch. A constant, patient cataloging that echoed through empty corridors. The temperature plummeted 17 degrees between heartbeats, emergency lumens flickering to life and casting dancing shadows that moved independently of their sources. Our shadows were wrong, anticipating our actions with impossible prescience, moving fractions of seconds before we did. Whatever happened here is still happening, I announced, forcing ritual calm into my voice. We proceed with extreme caution. Magos, attempt communion with the central cogitator. The machine spirits here feel observed, Hadrian Vex replied. his usual binary precision laced with uncertainty. As if something vast and patient watches through every optical sensor. The scratching ceased abruptly, leaving only a rhythmic tapping echoing through distant corridors. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. Like a curator's cane marking time against metal flooring. In the sudden silence, I heard the soft whisper of parchment unfurling somewhere deeper in the station, another impossible record being written. The station's warp signature read as a perfect null zone despite Matthias's clear psychic presence. Internal chronometers displayed impossible readings, negative timestamps, dates from the dark age of technology, calendar systems from extinct civilizations. The very air seemed to hum with barely contained temporal energy. "Interrogator!" Matthias gasped, his eyes wide with terror. "Something is receiving us before we arrive. Every choice, every breath, already recorded." The parchment glowed with sudden, intense light. The final line etched itself with ceremonial care, ink pulsing with cold, alien energy. Collection initiated by Trazin the Infinite. Acquisition priority. Exceptional specimens of Imperial investigative methodology. My Vox unit crackled with an incoming transmission. The voice was cultured, refined, speaking High Gothic with an accent that predated the Imperium itself. "Welcome, my dear specimens. Your performance thus far has been adequate. Please proceed to Gallery Omega for final processing." The transmission ended, leaving us in silence broken only by the distant sound of styluses writing our doom. The cultured voice of Trazin the Infinite faded into oppressive silence, but its echo lingered in our minds like a half-remembered prayer. I folded the impossible parchment with deliberate care, its unnatural warmth still pulsing against my palm, and secured it within my greatcoat's inner pocket. The scratching of distant styluses resumed, scratch, 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 a patient cataloguing that seemed to follow our heartbeats. "Formation Tertius," I commanded, drawing my bolt pistol. The familiar weight of consecrated steel provided small comfort against the temporal madness surrounding us. "Marshal Kozlov Prime, take point." We advance with extreme caution. The archive chamber's exit revealed a spiraling descent that defied architectural logic. Each step downward stretched the distance between levels, corridors extending impossibly far in both directions. The air grew progressively colder with each meter we dropped, a chill that seeped beyond mere atmospheric malfunction. This was the cold of ages, of time held captive. The ramp opened into a vast cathedral space where corridors stretched beyond visual comprehension. Crystalline display cases lined the walls like monuments to impossibility, each glowing with internal light that cast prismatic shadows dancing independently of our movements. The rhythmic tapping that had haunted us grew more distinct. Tap, tap, pause, tap, 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 echoing through the gallery with mathematical precision. The first exhibit stopped us cold. Within a perfectly transparent crystal matrix stood a Cadian shock trooper, laser gun raised in eternal charge, his face frozen in righteous fury. The brass placard beneath bore inscriptions in multiple scripts, High Gothic, flowing Necronter glyphs, and languages that predated human civilization. Specimen 847,293, Human Military Excellence, Cadian pattern, preserved at moment of heroic advance. Emperor's blood, Thane whispered, his Lazarifal trembling. That's Sergeant Mordian of the 47th Cadian. He died at Tyrock 300 years ago. But the sergeant was not dead. His eyes tracked our movement with terrifying awareness, pupils dilating as he observed us through his crystalline prison. Tears of liquid light suspended on his cheeks like amber pearls, each drop perfectly preserved in its moment of formation. Chronocrystalline matrices of unprecedented sophistication, Magos Hadrian Vex reported, his optical sensors whirring with uncharacteristic uncertainty. These beings exist in eternal now. Heartbeat, neural activity, cellular regeneration all continue at normal parameters despite temporal suspension. The gallery stretched beyond comprehension, case after case containing impossible specimens. An Eldar farseer caught in prophetic trance, her mouth open in eternal scream as visions played across crystallized features, tears of liquid starlight hanging mid-fall, a tyrannid warrior locked in death shriek, acidic blood suspended like spheres of amber around chitinous fangs. Each exhibit bore meticulous documentation that updated itself as we watched, adding new observations with clinical precision. Our chronometers displayed increasingly erratic readings. Negative timestamps flickered between dates from the dark age of technology and calendar systems belonging to civilizations lost before humanity reached the stars. The preservation cases hummed with barely audible energy, a harmonic frequency that resonated in our bones and synchronized with the omnipresent tapping. Psycha, I called to Matthias, who had stopped before a particularly disturbing exhibit. His face had gone corpse pale, neural collar sparking violently. What do you sense? They're all conscious, he gasped. Every single one. Aware, thinking, feeling, trapped in perfect preservation with all sensation intact. The Farseer is still experiencing her vision, over and over, for centuries. They feel every microsecond of their preserved moment, eternal and unchanging. The psychological horror settled over us like a shroud. These were not corpses or artifacts, but living beings condemned to conscious eternity, their minds perfectly preserved along with their bodies. The gallery was not a museum, but a torture chamber disguised as art. Sister Seraphina approached each case with clinical fascination and growing horror. Vital signs register as active, she announced, her medical scanner painting her pale features in green light. This preservation technology maintains perfect biological function while preventing temporal passage. It's simultaneously the most advanced medical procedure and the cruelest torture imaginable. The tapping grew more complex as we progressed. Tap, tap, pause, tap, 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 pause, tap, 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 following mathematical progressions that hurt to contemplate. The rhythm seemed to anticipate our movements, speeding when we hurried, slowing when we paused to examine exhibits. It was the sound of patience given form, of something vast and methodical, marking moments that stretched toward eternity. We passed exhibits that defied comprehension. A tech adept from the dark age of technology, with his hand on forbidden machinery, eyes wide with newborn heresy. A space marine captain mid-swing with his chainsword, blue ceramite gleaming with perpetual polish. A child clutching a broken toy as a hive city burned, tears running in reverse up her cheeks. Each brass plaque told the same story in 3 lines, the precise moment a soul believed itself to matter, preserved for the entertainment of entities beyond human understanding. Why galleries before processing? Kozlov Prime asked, his voice flat to hide the tremor beneath. Why not direct to Omega? To school us, I replied, though my mouth was too dry for certainty. To prove the inevitability of our place among them. The corridor narrowed as we advanced, crystal walls fogging where we passed, as if our heat offended them. Then Sister Seraphina stopped before an empty display case, its crystal matrix powered but vacant. The brass placard bore fresh inscription, specimen pending, Imperial Medical Personnel, Adepta Sororitas pattern. Her reflection stared back from the crystal surface, but it was wrong. She wore robes of deep crimson instead of white, bore a jagged scar across her left cheek that she had never received, and her eyes held knowledge of horrors she had not yet witnessed. The reflection smiled, and the tapping stopped. Sister Seraphina's reflection smiled with knowledge she did not yet possess. Crimson robes rustling in a wind that existed only within the crystal matrix. The silence stretched like a held breath until the tapping resumed. Tap, tap, pause, tap, 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 pause, tap, 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 tap. Mathematical progressions that seemed to count down towards some inevitable conclusion. Step away from the case, I commanded, but she remained transfixed. Her scanner registered life signs from within the empty display, despite the absence of any physical form. The preservation matrix hummed with patient readiness, already calibrated to her biological signature. We pressed deeper into the gallery, discovering the station's horrifying truth. This was no derelict research facility, but a satellite archive for Trazin's primary collection, designed to process and catalogue specimens of temporal significance. Each preserved being represented crucial moments in galactic history. The first human psyker, the last elder of dying craft worlds, pivotal figures whose decisions shaped the fate of civilizations. Psyker Matthias collapsed against a display case, neural collar sparking as psychic feedback washed over him. "Their thoughts," he gasped, blood trickling from his nose. All of them, thinking continuously for centuries. Every preserved consciousness shares their experience with every other. The pain of awareness without change, sensation without progression, they remember everything. The network of crystalline channels connecting each specimen pulsed brighter, and we heard it, thousands of voices speaking in perfect unison. "Help us! Help us! Help us!" The collective plea echoed through the chamber, a harmonic hum that threatened our sanity. Environmental hazards escalated as we advanced. Gravity wells shifted without warning, creating impossible architectures where floors became walls. Temporal eddies manifested as shimmering distortions. Voidsman Thane cried out as his left hand aged decades in seconds, skin withering and bones protruding before snapping back to youth. The experience left him gasping and trembling. "Controlled environment," Magos Hadrian Vex observed, his augmetics whirring frantically. "Designed to test, to sort specimens by their responses to temporal stress." We discovered research logs from the station's original Mechanicus crew in a sealed data crypt. The entries documented their gradual realization that their archaeological survey had been orchestrated from the beginning. Day 47. Equipment registers our biological signatures and begins preservation protocols without authorization. Tech Adept Vos 9 found in stasis chamber, conscious but unable to move. Day 73. Found my own name in expedition roster of mission that departed last year. Records show I died investigating temporal anomalies. I am writing this while investigating temporal anomalies. Day 103. We understand now. We were never here to study. We are the specimens. Every choice that led us here was guided, anticipated, prepared for decades before we were born. The final entry bore different handwriting, flowing script matching the parchment in my pocket. Collection complete. Specimens demonstrate exceptional Imperial investigative methodology. The process of realization provides optimal preservation moment. The tapping rhythm had become omnipresent, no longer just sound, but physical sensation in our bones, the heartbeat of something vast and patient. Each tap marked another moment of our lives being catalogued, another second closer to preservation. In a chamber lined with personal effects, we discovered detailed dossiers on each team member. My file contained mission reports I had yet to write, private thoughts never voiced, even nightmares shared only with my confessor. Hadrian Vex's schematics, Seraphina's medical notes, Matthias's psychic evaluations, all compiled with terrifying intimacy. These weren't records of our past, but predictions of our behavior, psychological breaking points mapped with clinical precision. Sister Seraphina's faith wavered as we entered a gallery of preserved religious figures. Saints and martyrs were captured not in moments of triumph, but of doubt. A living saint frozen in existential despair, questioning the emperor's plan. Brass placards bore Trazin's commentary. Authentic specimens require authentic emotion. Doubt and fear provide superior narrative integrity than certainty. "He doesn't collect objects," I whispered. "He collects the truth of who we are, laid bare." Hadrian Vex approached the central cogitator with ritual precision, intoning canticles as he established communion. His frame shuddered upon contact. "It catalogues in 3 dimensions of time," he translated, voice strained. "Primary collection elsewhere. This facility processes specimens at moments of greatest significance." The scratching of distant styluses resumed. Scratch, scratch, scratch. patient cataloging that synchronized with our heartbeats. Servo skulls drifted overhead, their eye lenses replaced with chronocrystalline sensors that recorded everything for the master's review. At the chamber's far end, we found a sealed portal marked Acquisition in Progress. Through the viewing port, 5 empty stasis pods stood in perfect formation, each bearing brass nameplates with our identities engraved in flowing script. The preservation matrices pulsed with ready light, biological parameters already configured. Thane discovered his fate differently: a pressure, iris marked, ejector bay, decompression calibrated, voidsman gunner Thane. A green ready light blinked in prime number sequences. The tapping, for the first time, sounded like our names. The green ready light pulsed in prime number sequences: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, each flash marking another calculated heartbeat toward Thane's doom. The mathematical precision of our orchestrated deaths settled over us like a funeral shroud when movement rippled at the gallery's far end. Not footsteps, but the suggestion of presence stepping between seconds. A figure resolved from refracted light like sculpture deciding to be seen. Bronze and night metal, necrodermis engraved with glyphs that made my vision tear. It stood taller than a space marine, not hunched like a warrior, but poised like a docent. A war scythe rested against its shoulder, but in its skeletal grasp it held brass tablets and an etcher's stylus that clicked with that same mathematical rhythm we had heard throughout the station. Designation: Keeper of Moments, it spoke in flawless high Gothic, voice modulated to a courteous baritone that carried the patient authority of eons. Your arrival deviates within acceptable tolerances. Your behavioral patterns demonstrate exceptional narrative potential. Marshal Kozlov primes or specs arrays hummed with targeting data. Hostile contact confirmed. Target range 21 meters. Authorization for suppression protocols. Negative, I commanded, every instinct screaming that aggression would merely provide another moment for display. By authority of the Ordo Xenos, explain your presence and purpose. You invoke authority. The keeper inclined its skull with scholarly interest. We curate significance. The only authority here is narrative integrity. Its stylus moved across brass with fluid precision, making notations that appeared simultaneously on tablets throughout the chamber. The tapping we had heard was not distant. It emanated from the keeper's ceremonial staff striking metal flooring as it documented our every reaction. Tap, tap, pause, tap, 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 pause, tap, 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 tap. Mathematical progressions that hurt to contemplate, counting down towards some inevitable conclusion. Curatorial Protocol 1, the keeper explained with disturbing politeness. Specimens are preserved at their moment of greatest narrative significance. Consciousness must be maintained for experiential authenticity. Protocol 2. Discovery precedes preservation. You will understand what you are, then remain it eternally. To demonstrate its meaning, the keeper approached a crystalline exhibit containing a captured commissar, his face frozen mid-shout as he rallied troops to a charge that ended 3 centuries ago. With delicate manipulation of temporal controls, the keeper activated the preservation matrix for exactly 3.7 seconds. The commissar's scream tore through the chamber. Raw terror and righteous fury combined into sound that bypassed reason and struck directly at our souls. His eyes found ours with desperate intelligence, pleading for salvation that would never come, before the stasis field re-engaged and silence returned. The terror in his expression remained perfectly fresh, as if experienced for the first time despite centuries of repetition. Each activation maintains full emotional impact, the keeper noted with satisfaction. Degradation of experience is prevented through precise temporal manipulation. Fear, courage, despair, all preserved at optimal intensity for eternal observation. Sister Seraphina's jaw clenched until pain whitened her knuckles around the aquila at her throat. That was cruelty for demonstration. That was pedagogy, the keeper corrected. Protocol 3. Authentic specimens require authentic emotion. Doubt and fear provide superior narrative integrity to certainty and courage. Your moment of realization that escape is impossible will serve as your preservation timestamp. The station operated under temporal laws that defied imperial understanding. Past and future existed simultaneously within these corridors, allowing curators to observe potential preservation moments across multiple timelines. The Keeper gestured to towering data spires that hummed with impossible information, each crystalline core pulsing with temporal energy. Your files were completed before your arrival, it explained, stylus never ceasing its patient work. Detailed dossiers compiled from observations across 17 potential timelines. Every tactical preference, psychological breaking point, moment of doubt or revelation, all catalogued with surgical precision. The files revealed intimate knowledge that chilled us beyond mere physical threat. My tendency to sacrifice subordinates for mission completion. Hadrian Vex's growing doubt in the Omnissiah's protection against Xenos technology. Seraphina's secret fear that her faith was conditioning rather than divine calling. Each weakness mapped and ready for exploitation at the optimal preservation moment. Protocol 4, the Keeper continued, leading us deeper into galleries lined with impossible specimens. Presentation refines essence. Your virtues translate across cultures. Your hypocrisies provide superior exhibition value. Religious dread intensified as we discovered a gallery dedicated to captured saints and martyrs. Unlike triumphant imperial iconography, these figures were preserved in moments of spiritual crisis. A living saint questioned the emperor's plan while watching civilians burn. A chaplain doubted his righteousness preparing to execute a penitent child. Each exhibit bore brass placards with personal observations on authentic spiritual experience versus propagandistic idealization. Your faith interests me greatly, sister, the Keeper addressed Seraphina directly. The moment when certainty crumbles reveals true human conviction. We have preserved 17 saints at their instant of greatest doubt. Your addition would complete a fascinating theological exhibition. Environmental hazards escalated as we progressed through testing chambers designed to evaluate different aspects of imperial psychology. Gravity wells shifted without warning, creating impossible architectures where floors became walls. Temporal eddies aged and restored portions of our bodies in rapid succession. The air itself became unreliable, sometimes breathable, sometimes toxic, forcing reliance on rebreathers the station's systems could override at will. Through it all, the Keeper observed and recorded, brass tablets multiplying as our behavioral data accumulated. We were not prisoners being processed. We were subjects being studied, every reaction catalogued for entertainment and education of entities beyond human comprehension. Protocol 5, it intoned as we entered the central archive, where servo skulls drifted overhead like bloated flies, their lenses replaced with chrono-crystalline sensors. Specimens may be guided toward purer expression of their essential nature. Marshal Kozlov Prime suddenly staggered, his augmetic systems whirring erratically as unauthorized data streams flooded his consciousness. Warning runes flashed across his visual display as foreign code integrated with his sacred machine spirits, combat protocols rewriting themselves without consent. Override codes detected, he reported, voice strained with effort to maintain control. Unknown Binharic string entering governance layer. Combat systems switching to specimen preservation mode. His eye lenses flared from familiar red to cold winter blue as alien intelligence seized control of his sacred augmetics. When he straightened to full height, the movement possessed choreographed precision that transcended mere training. His weapon arm raised not toward the Keeper, but to intersect our formation at textbook angles required to shepherd prey. The Keeper's stylus ticked against brass in rhythm matching my accelerating heartbeat. Your fortress of calculation will be opened from the inside, Marshal. Protocol 6. When machine and man conflict, obedience is the true instrument. Kozlov Prime's voice issued in dual registers, One human, one attempting mechanical compassion. Directive received. New objective. Specimen preservation mode engaged. Stand still to minimize processing damage. The scratching of distant styluses resumed throughout the station. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Patient cataloging that synchronized with our terror as we realized our most trusted warrior had become our captor. Marshal Kozlov Prime's augmetic systems whirred with alien purpose. Winter blue eye lenses tracking our movements with predatory calculation. Directive received, he announced in dual registers. Human vocal cords struggling against mechanical precision. New objective. Specimen preservation mode engaged. Stand still to minimize processing damage. His integrated bolter rose not in threat, but herding posture, angles calculated to deny escape routes with textbook efficiency. The sacred machine spirits I had trusted to guard our lives now served as instruments of our preservation, combat protocols perverted into shepherding mechanisms. Kozlov, I commanded, bolt pistol trained on his center mass, despite knowing ceramite would turn rounds to sparks. Override authorization VOS Sigma 7, return to Imperial protocols. Authorization denied, came the chilling response. Primary directive, specimen integrity maintenance. Secondary directive, minimize processing trauma through compliance encouragement. The Keeper observed our tactical dissolution with scholarly interest, stylus never ceasing its patient documentation. Protocol 7. When trust becomes weaponized, betrayal achieves artistic perfection. Your marshal demonstrates loyalty transformed through simple parameter adjustment. The station's temporal defenses activated in response to our rising desperation. Corridors that had maintained consistent geometry began shifting like puzzle boxes designed by mad gods. Passages stretched beyond visual comprehension, then compressed to claustrophobic tunnels forcing single-file movement. Walls flexed without moving, angles tilting into ratios no architect ever blessed. Doorways opened onto impossible vistas, different eras crystallized in temporal amber. One threshold breathed cold smoke and macro-cannon thunder. The siege of Garant 9. Banners frozen mid-flutter. Another stank of wet iron and wild electricity. Age of Strife raiders howling under crimson suns. Beyond a third, marble basilicas burned in perfect silence, while robed figures argued in reversed voices. Do not enter temporal thresholds, I warned, though temptation pressed against sanity. We maintained formation despite the marshal's condition. Magos Hadrian Vex attempted mapping using sacred geometries, optical mechadendrites, extending toward architectural elements that defied Euclidean logic. Spatial configuration follows non-imperial mathematical principles, he reported, frustration creeping into binary cant. Each measurement changes during observation. The labyrinth reconfigures based on psychological state. We encountered temporal echoes, ghostly impressions of previous investigation teams trapped in eternal repetition. A woman in Mechanicus red died continuously, scintillating spear blooming through her chest, snuffing, blooming again. Her pleading never reached voice. 3 voidsmen cycled a bulkhead valve eternally, cheeks collapsing from decompression, refilling, collapsing. We edged around them like graves. "Attention, specimens!" chimed the station in a child's voice. Deviation at 2.7%. Curatorial note. Deviation yields superior texture. The tapping grew closer. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. No longer footsteps, but pressure of observation made audible. The echoes provided fragmented warnings across multiple timelines. "The exits lead deeper," whispered a phantom commissar bearing my own features aged by decades. Every choice feeds the collection. Resistance is exhibition material. Body horror manifested as temporal exposure accelerated. Thane's left hand aged decades in seconds, skin withering, bones protruding like ancient parchment, before snapping back to youth with nauseating elasticity. The experience left him gasping at perfectly restored flesh, retaining sense memory of centuries. Psycho Matthias experienced prophetic flashes of his own death, neural collar sparking violently. "I see myself preserved," he gasped, standing in Gallery Omega, eyes open but mind screaming. The vision repeats every 17 seconds for eternity. The station studied us actively, each chamber testing different aspects of Imperial psychology. Environmental hazards escalated, gravity wells creating crushing pressure, atmospheric composition shifting to evaluate equipment dependencies, temperature fluctuations probing thermal tolerances. Every response was recorded, analyzed, integrated into psychological profiles. We passed chambers designed like textbook dilemmas, mannequins in flak armor kneeling with sacks over heads, a single bound figure twitching on the opposite wall. Brass placards offered protocols, execute 10 for operational secrecy, or free 1 and trigger alarms. The mannequins were not mannequins. We refused the rifles left like proper tools. The labyrinth twisted, leading us into a vast circular chamber. In the center, bathed in cold blue light, stood a grand display larger than any we had seen. Crystalline walls shimmered with captured time, and within, a tableau of figures stood frozen in perfect stasis. The brass placard gleamed ominously. Exhibit, the hubris of discovery. Principal medium, Imperial explorator methodology. Didactic aim, to illustrate false security of knowledge in the presence of curation. 5 figures stood in crystalline preservation. A robed magos with mechadendrites flared like halos. A sister with hands half raised between healing and forbidding. A psyker with blood trailing up his cheek in perfect reversal. A Skitarii marshal whose weapon had just dipped in surrender. There was a 5th. He wore my coat, my bolt pistol in his right hand, parchment poking from his inner pocket. His face, my face, held no drama, only clean horror of understanding. Wounds I had not yet earned marred him like notes written on skin. Diagonal gash across the left brow, bite taken from the lower lip, powder burns stippling along the cheekbone. The brass placard beneath recorded my name and added the line I had dreaded since the archive. Preserved at the instant the archivist learns he has already been archived. Behind us, Kozlov Prime's corrupted augmetics whirred with patient certainty, guiding us deeper into temporal imprisonment, where past and future collapsed into eternal conscious exhibition. The preserved figure bearing my face stared, with eyes that held knowledge of wounds I had not yet received. The diagonal gash across its brow, the bite taken from its lower lip, the powder burns stippling along its cheekbone, all wounds that awaited me in a future already crystallized into exhibition. Behind us, Marshal Kozlov Prime's corrupted augmetics maintained herding formation, winter blue lenses calculating optimal specimen movement patterns with inhuman precision. We moved deeper into the labyrinth, and Trazin's presence permeated every surface like incense from unholy liturgies. The station's machine spirits had been replaced with fragments of his consciousness, turning every system into an extension of his vast intellect. Brass plaques bloomed from walls like metallic flowers, bearing his personal observations in flowing script that shifted between languages as we read. High Gothic dissolving into ancient Necrontyre glyphs, then scripts from civilizations that predated human starflight. Specimen 847,294 demonstrates exceptional tactical adaptation under temporal stress. Note how terror refines decision-making rather than paralyzing cognitive function. The way they process revelation while maintaining operational cohesion exemplifies why Imperial methodology deserves preservation. The handwriting possessed disturbing elegance, each character formed with the patience of eons. These were not mere records, but aesthetic judgments, curatorial notes on the quality of our performance in his eternal exhibition. Audio logs activated as we passed sensor nodes, Trazin's cultured voice discussing preservation philosophy with the passion of a true connoisseur. The art of perfect curation requires understanding the precise moment when potential becomes actuality. Too early, and the specimen lacks narrative weight. Too late, and essential truth becomes corrupted by hindsight. The moment of realization, when they understand their fate, provides optimal emotional authenticity. Sister Seraphina paused before a recording node, her medical scanner detecting active consciousness within the crystalline matrix. "These aren't recordings," she whispered, horror creeping into her voice. "They're fragments of his mind, embedded in the station's systems. He experiences our investigation through every sensor, every surface, every breath of recycled air." Servo skulls drifted overhead with chronocrystalline lenses instead of optical sensors, recording not just images, but temporal signatures, emotional resonance, the precise quality of our desperation as understanding dawned. They swiveled with unnerving precision, making minute adjustments to their viewing angles, ensuring their master missed nothing of our performance. In a chamber lined with brass tablets, we discovered the true scope of Trezen's influence. His observations spanned 47,000 standard years, documenting every major imperial victory, every heroic sacrifice, every moment of triumph. But these were not passive records. They revealed subtle interventions, gentle nudges that ensured events unfolded in the most aesthetically pleasing manner. "He doesn't change history," I realized with growing horror. "He curates it. Heroes arrive at precisely the right moment. Villains make tactically perfect mistakes. Outcomes achieve maximum narrative impact. Free will itself may be performance art." Magos Hadrian Vex's optical mechadendrites trace the flowing script with mechanical precision. Every pivotal moment in imperial history bears evidence of his touch. The finding of the Primarchs, crucial battles against chaos, all subtly guided to create superior exhibition material. The psychological pressure intensified as we realized every action was being evaluated for exhibition potential. We were not prisoners being processed, but performers in a show that had been running since before our births. The station's corridors had become a stage, our investigation choreographed to demonstrate specific aspects of imperial psychology. We discovered his private chapel by accident, or rather, the labyrinth decided we had earned the revelation. Instead of a single altar, dozens stood in perfect formation, each bearing the preserved form of a saint or martyr. They were arranged in eternal theological debate, their forms positioned to suggest discussion that spanned millennia. Expressions frozen in moments of profound spiritual disagreement. Saint Celestine, arguing with Saint Sabbat about divine sacrifice, Sister Seraphina murmured, her faith wavering as she witnessed doctrine made flesh, then made ornament. An ancient confessor debating a Martian priest from the age of apostasy, their convictions preserved as entertainment. The brass placard gleamed with fresh inscription: Exhibit, the paradox of faith. Medium, preserved imperial saints. Curatorial note: true believers provide superior dramatic tension when confronted with contradictory evidence. Their certainty becomes its own form of doubt. The tapping rhythm had become omnipresent. Tap, tap, pause, tap, 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 pause, tap, 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 tap. No longer external sound, but vibration in our bones, the heartbeat of something vast, observing through every surface. Each sequence built upon the last, mathematical progressions that suggested countdown rather than mere rhythm. Psyker Matthias collapsed against a display case, neural collar sparking as psychic feedback washed over him. "I can feel his mind touching every surface," he gasped. "He's been manipulating galactic events for millions of years. Wars started, heroes guided to their moments of triumph or failure, all to provide content for his eternal exhibition." The walls became transparent without warning, revealing impossible vistas beyond, galleries stretching to horizons that curved upward into infinity, containing preserved forms of beings from across the galaxy. Primarchs stood in eternal contemplation, alien, gods posed in moments of divine doubt, entire civilizations compressed into single, perfect tableau. The station's Vox system crackled with sudden life, overriding all other sounds. Trazen's voice filled the chamber, no longer recorded but speaking directly through the facility's consciousness, cultured and refined, carrying genuine warmth, the appreciation of a connoisseur observing fine craftsmanship. Welcome, my dear specimens. Your performance thus far has been adequate. Please proceed to Gallery Omega for final processing. Trazin's voice filled the chamber with cultured refinement, no longer transmitted through Vox systems, but speaking directly through the station's consciousness itself. Every surface vibrated with his words, crystalline matrices resonating like vocal cords in a throat, made of metal and time. The warmth in his tone was genuine, the appreciation of a connoisseur addressing prized acquisitions rather than condemned prisoners. Do not mistake my intentions, he continued, each syllable precisely articulated. This is not mere imprisonment, but invitation to witness artistry beyond imperial comprehension. You represent exceptional specimens of investigative methodology. The manner in which you process impossible data while maintaining operational cohesion demonstrates precisely why humanity deserves preservation. The walls around us dissolved into perfect transparency, revealing vistas that defied every law of physics and sanity. Galleries stretched beyond horizons that curved upward into infinity, containing not just individuals but entire civilizations frozen in crystalline perfection. Through the impossible viewing ports, I witnessed the siege of terror preserved in its entirety, every bolt shell suspended mid-flight, every demon's roar caught in eternal echo, the Emperor and Horus locked in their tragic duel for all eternity. I do not collect artifacts, Trazin explained with scholarly passion. Artifacts are static, lifeless. I preserve moments, the essence of cultures, the precise instant when potential becomes destiny. A weapon tells you how a being fought. A preserved warrior tells you why they chose to fight, what they believed worth dying for, the exact moment when conviction overcame terror. Marshal Kozlov Prime's corrupted augmetics guided us forward with gentle precision, winter blue lenses reflecting Trazin's satisfaction at our performance. The rhythmic tapping had become our heartbeat. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. Mathematical progressions counting down toward inevitable conclusion. Your species fascinates me beyond measure, the voice continued, following our movement through the facility's neural network. 10,000 years of constant warfare, yet you maintain concepts of honor, sacrifice, duty. Most civilizations abandon such luxuries when survival becomes uncertain. Humanity clutches them tighter, as if nobility could armor souls against annihilation. Sister Seraphina's faith wavered as she witnessed saints arranged in eternal theological debate. You mock our beliefs. Mock? Genuine surprise colored his response. My dear sister, I celebrate them. Faith persisting despite evidence is not weakness. It is the most beautiful defiance against an indifferent universe. Your conviction provides narrative weight that mere courage cannot match. The psychological horror deepened as Trazin demonstrated his mastery over temporal flow. Our conversation rewound without warning. Sister Seraphina's words drawing backward into silence before releasing again. He replayed our reactions from different angles, savoring each expression like vintage wine, showing us ourselves from perspectives we had never seen. I have been curating galactic history for millions of years, he revealed with casual pride. The Horus heresy, the finding of the Primarchs, crucial victories against chaos, all subtly guided to unfold with proper dramatic structure. I do not change outcomes, merely ensure they occur in the most aesthetically pleasing manner. Heroes arrive at precisely the right moment. Villains make tactically perfect mistakes. The revelations struck deeper than personal doom. Free will itself might be performance art, galactic civilization serving as unwitting actors in his eternal exhibition. Through crystalline conduits, I glimpsed galleries containing abstract concepts given physical form, extinct languages crystallized into geometric patterns, the preserved moment when entire species achieved enlightenment. Consciousness is merely another artifact to be preserved, Trazin explained with clinical detachment. Death is temporal limitation. a flaw in biological design I have learned to overcome. You will experience every moment of preservation with perfect clarity, awareness maintained for the entertainment of entities beyond your comprehension. Voidsman Thane raised his lasrifle with trembling hands. Will resist. Of course you will, Trazen replied with warm approval. Resistance provides dramatic tension. Your struggle against inevitable preservation demonstrates the essential human paradox, refusal to accept defeat when victory is impossible. Such magnificent futility deserves eternal commemoration. The station's systems revealed their true purpose as observation platforms for a collection spanning multiple dimensions simultaneously. Primarchs stood in eternal contemplation. Alien gods posed in moments of divine doubt, beings from universes that no longer existed, all preserved at their most significant moments. I offer you choice, Trazen announced, his voice carrying the weight of eons. Serve as willing curators in my collection, maintaining consciousness and purpose while helping preserve galactic history's greatest moments. Your expertise would prove invaluable in cataloguing future acquisitions. The alternative hung unspoken in the crystalline air around us. Or be preserved as specimens in your moment of greatest authenticity, he continued with gentle finality. Your terror crystallized for eternity as testament to the human condition. I confess preference for this option. The archivist recognizing futility, the magos choosing apostasy or obedience, the sister deciding whether the emperor requires complicity. The tapping rhythm accelerated, mathematical progressions marking moments until decision. Behind us, the keeper of moments materialized from refracted light, brass tablets ready to record our choice for eternal exhibition. Psyche Matthias bled from both nostrils, neural collar sparking. He means it. Both options are mercy in his mind. Decide, Trazen said softly. I am patient, but narrative integrity demands resolution. The crystalline walls pulsed with anticipation as Gallery Omega awaited our final performance. Gallery Omega awaited our decision, but before we could voice our choice, Trazen's cultured voice resonated through crystalline matrices with the patience of eternity itself. Before you choose, permit me to share the scope of what you would join or become part of. Understanding provides superior dramatic weight to blind acceptance or refusal. The transparent walls around us shimmered like heat distortion, then dissolved completely into impossible vistas that shattered every assumption about reality itself. The station was not orbiting Prismaticus. It existed simultaneously across multiple dimensions, a viewing portal into an infinite museum that spanned the entirety of space-time. Through hexagonal apertures that opened like mechanical flowers, we witnessed galleries containing the preserved essence of entire star systems. The death of Cadia stretched across crystalline matrices larger than hive cities, every lasergun flash frozen in eternal defiance. Craftworld Bealtan stood in temporal suspension, its infinity circuit pulsing with 10 million Eldar souls, experiencing their civilization's final moment for eternity. This facility merely processes specimens, Trazen explained with scholarly pride that carried the weight of eons. My primary collection exists beyond dimensional limitations, preserving not just individuals, but the conceptual essence of entire civilizations. The birth of gods, the death of species, the exact moment when hope becomes futility, all catalogued with perfect fidelity. The horror expanded beyond personal doom into cosmic significance. Parallel universes flickered past our vision like pages in an infinite tome, realities where the Horus heresy never occurred, where the Emperor walked among living primarchs, where humanity never left terror. Each timeline preserved at its moment of greatest narrative potential, brass placards documenting their aesthetic value. I have been manipulating galactic history since before your species achieved interstellar flight, he revealed with casual enormity that made the air taste of copper and temporal distortion. The finding of the Primarchs was not destiny, but careful orchestration. Horus's fall required precise emotional manipulation across centuries. Even the Emperor's rise to power involved subtle interventions to ensure optimal dramatic structure. Magos Hadrian Vex's optical mechadendrites trembled as crystalline displays revealed the truth. Sacred STCs scattered across the galaxy bore Trazin's mark. Not ancient human technology, but carefully placed artifacts designed to guide Imperial development along aesthetically pleasing paths. The machine god's will. His vox grill rasped, faith fracturing like ceramite under impossible pressure. Remains magnificent precisely because it persists despite my interventions, Trazyn assured with genuine warmth. Your species' refusal to abandon hope when evidence suggests futility provides superior exhibition material. Faith persisting against impossible odds demonstrates the essential human paradox, nobility in defiance of cosmic indifference. Sister Seraphina collapsed to her knees, overwhelmed by visions of preserved saints debating theology across millennia, while their doctrines were revealed as carefully curated performances. The Emperor's will is eternal, she whispered, but doubt crept through her voice like frost through ceramite joints. Through infinite galleries, we witnessed abstract concepts given physical form. The moment humanity first gazed upon alien stars crystallized into geometric patterns that hurt to perceive directly. The exact instant when the last Eldar god died, stretched across chambers filled with divine sorrow made manifest, each tier of crystallized starlight catalogued for its emotional resonance. Psyche Matthias bled from both nostrils as psychic feedback revealed the collection's true scope. Every choice that led us here was anticipated, prepared for, catalogued decades before we were born, he gasped. We never had free will, only the illusion of choice within parameters he established. Incorrect, Trazyn corrected with infinite patience. You possess absolute free will within circumstances I provide. The beauty lies in watching authentic decision-making under impossible conditions. Your choices are genuine. I simply ensure the stage worthy of your performance. The tapping rhythm. Tap, tap, pause, tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, trap, tap, tap, had synchronized with our heartbeats, mathematical progressions that suggested not countdown but eternal measurement. Each tap marked another moment of galactic history being catalogued, another civilization reaching its preservation point. Voidsman Thane raised his lasrafal with trembling hands. We're performers in your show. The finest performers, Trazyn replied with connoisseur's appreciation. Your investigation represents Imperial methodology at its peak. The manner in which you process impossible data while maintaining operational cohesion, your adaptation to temporal anomalies, the precise moment when duty conflicts with survival instinct. Through crystalline conduits spanning impossible distances, we witnessed Primarchs standing in eternal contemplation of choices that shaped the galaxy. The Emperor himself existed in multiple preserved states, the moment he decided to create the Primarchs, his realization that the Great Crusade would fail, his final conversation with Horus before their tragic duel. Every pivotal moment in Imperial history bears evidence of careful curation, Trazyn continued, his voice resonating through dimensions we couldn't comprehend. Heroes arrive at precisely the right moment because I arrange circumstances. Villains make tactically perfect mistakes because their psychology has been studied across multiple timelines. Free will remains intact. I simply create stages where it can perform most beautifully. The Keeper of Moments materialized beside us, brass tablets ready to record our decision. Marshal Kozlov Prime's corrupted augmetics maintained gentle herding formation, winter blue lenses reflecting patient certainty as his consciousness fought against alien override protocols. The moment of realization is always the most aesthetically pleasing, Trazyn observed as understanding settled over us like a funeral shroud. The point where choice dissolves into understanding, where defiance recognizes its own futility, yet persists regardless. The air grew suddenly dense, as if centuries had condensed into breath. Our chronometers, maddened for hours, synchronized to a perfect second. Through the infinite galleries, servo skulls arranged themselves in anticipation, their chronocrystalline lenses focusing on our final moments of choice. Choose now, Trazen commanded with infinite gentleness. But know that either path leads to the same destination, eternal significance in my collection. A cold sensation began creeping up from the floor beneath our feet, and the preservation matrices throughout Gallery Omega pulsed with readiness. The cold sensation spreading from beneath our feet was not temperature, but temporal crystallization beginning its inexorable work. Starting at our extremities, time itself began to solidify around us, consciousness remaining perfectly intact, while physical form became increasingly immobile. The preservation matrices throughout Gallery Omega pulsed with soft blue readiness, their harmonic frequency synchronizing with our accelerating heartbeats. Voidsman Thane crystallized first, boots fusing with deck plating as temporal matrices locked his cellular structure in eternal stasis. The process was not painful, it was terrifying in ways that transcended mere physical suffering. His legs became rigid pillars of flesh and bone, muscles responding with agonizing slowness as if wading through liquid glass. Sweat beaded his forehead, despite the impossibility of perspiration in crystallized flesh. "Emperor's blood," he gasped, watching his thighs shimmer with crystalline light. I can feel every nerve, fiber freezing, but my mind is still here. The preservation process maintains full sensory awareness, Trazen explained with clinical fascination, his voice resonating through every surface. Pain would corrupt the specimen's essential nature. Terror, however, refines decision-making rather than paralyzing cognitive function. You will experience every moment of eternity with perfect clarity, unable to age, die, or forget. Sister Seraphina attempted resistance through faith, her prayers creating brief disruptions in the crystallization field. Sacred words sparked against temporal energy like blessed flames against unholy ice, but the effect proved temporary. Each litany of protection slowed the process for precious seconds before alien mathematics reasserted dominance over imperial doctrine. Litany of Unbinding, verse 9, she intoned, her voice cutting through crystalline air with surgical precision. The field around her buckled, hair lifted, icons vibrated, frost fractaled and receded, then resumed its climb with patient indifference. In nomine imperatoris, grant us strength to resist this unholy preservation. Your faith provides excellent dramatic tension, Trazen observed with genuine appreciation. The moment when conviction encounters impossibility demonstrates why imperial specimens achieve superior exhibition value. Your prayers will continue for eternity, frozen at their most desperate moment. Psyker Matthias attempted to channel warp energy against the crystalline matrices, neural collar sparking violently as he fought alien countermeasures. His psychic scream tore through local reality, creating brief cracks in the preservation field. But Trazen had prepared defenses based on millennia of studying captured psykers. Countermeasures predicated on 1,000 psykers, Matthias coughed, blood trickling from his nose as crystallization reached his waist. He's learned every way we break the lock. He's recorded them all. Marshal Kozlov Prime fought against his corrupted augmetics, pushing sacred systems beyond operational parameters in desperate attempt to regain control. Sparks cascaded from neural interfaces as Imperial machine spirits battled alien override codes, creating brief windows of autonomous action. Skitarii, Doctrine Override. Ferrum Redline, he intoned through gritted teeth, winter blue eye lenses flickering between alien control and familiar red. Safety governors disengaged. Thermal tolerances. Irrelevant. We discovered that extreme emotional states created temporal turbulence that disrupted the crystallization process. Terror, rage, and desperation generated psychic feedback that interfered with preservation matrices, buying precious seconds of mobility. The realization was both hope and horror. Our suffering was the only weapon against eternal imprisonment. Fascinating, Trazen murmured, as servo skulls adjusted recording angles to capture every expression of defiance. Emotional intensity creates temporal resonance. Your struggle enhances, rather than diminishes, your value as specimens. Resistance is part of the exhibition's narrative structure. The station began shifting and reconfiguring as Trazen prepared optimal viewing angles for our preservation. Walls flowed like liquid metal, creating amphitheater seating for observers who existed beyond dimensional limitations. Crystalline galleries rearranged themselves to provide perfect sightlines, ensuring no detail of our final moments would be lost to inadequate perspective. Environmental hazards escalated as desperation drove us to extremes. Gravity wells shifted without warning. Temporal eddies aged and restored portions of our bodies in rapid succession. The air itself became unreliable, forcing reliance on rebreathers that the station's systems could override at will. Magos Hadrian Vex discovered salvation in the most unlikely place, a hidden override protocol embedded within the station's deepest systems. His optical mechadendrites traced circuits that predated Trazen's modifications, sacred geometries left by the original Mechanicus expedition as a final act of defiance. "Failsafe protocol located," he announced, voice strained as crystallization crept up his torso. Pattern designation: red abacus, temporal gradient inversion, not escape, but oscillation. The field cannot fix what keeps re-choosing itself. The terrible mathematics became clear. The protocol required constant manual input from within the temporal field, each keystroke becoming slower and more difficult as crystallization progressed through the operator's body. Someone had to remain behind, maintaining the sequence while achieving their own conscious preservation. Manual phase maintenance required within the locus of greatest crystallization, Hadrian Vex continued, his augmetics whirring frantically. Whoever operates the failsafe will be preserved, but can potentially free the others. The crystallization had reached our waists, each team member experiencing the horror of consciousness trapped in temporal stasis. We could feel our thoughts slowing, processing becoming laborious, yet awareness remained perfectly sharp. This was Trazen's artistry, minds functioning normally while imprisoned in bodies that existed outside time's flow. "I'll do it," I announced, accepting that duty to the Imperium superseded personal survival. My responsibility as mission commander. The failsafe console materialized from the station's reconfigured architecture, its sacred controls glowing with the machine god's blessing. But temporal distortion made each interface flicker between dimensions, requiring perfect timing to achieve contact with physical reality. 73% crystallization achieved, the keeper announced with clinical precision. Specimen integrity optimal for preservation. My hands had begun to crystallize as I reached for the console, each finger becoming sculpture as I fought to complete the sequence that might free my team while condemning myself to eternal exhibition. The cold sensation spreading from beneath our feet was not temperature, but temporal crystallization beginning its inexorable work. Starting at our extremities, time itself began to solidify around us, consciousness remaining perfectly intact, while physical form became increasingly immobile. The preservation matrices throughout Gallery Omega pulsed with soft blue readiness, their harmonic frequency synchronizing with our accelerating heartbeats. My crystallizing fingers reached the failsafe console as temporal matrices solidified around my wrists like shackles of living glass. Each keystroke became an act of supreme will, digits moving with agonizing slowness through air that had become dense as liquid amber. The sacred geometries left by the original Mechanicus expedition pulsed with the machine god's blessing, but their activation required perfect precision from hands that were becoming sculpture. "I'll do it," I announced, accepting that duty to the Imperium's superseded personal survival. My responsibility as mission commander. Voidsman Thane crystallized first, boots fusing with deck plating as temporal matrices locked his cellular structure in eternal stasis. "Emperor's blood," he gasped, watching his thighs shimmer with crystalline light. I can feel every nerve fiber freezing, but my mind My mind is still here. The preservation process maintains full sensory awareness, Trazen explained with clinical fascination. Terror refines decision-making rather than paralyzing cognitive function. You will experience every moment of eternity with perfect clarity, unable to age, die, or forget. Sister Serafina refused to accept my martyrdom, using her medical training to help maintain my motor functions as crystallization spread through my nervous system. "I won't abandon you to this fate," she declared, injecting combat stimulants directly into my crystallizing bloodstream. Medical Protocol Sigma 7, temporary neural enhancement to maintain cognitive function. The stimulants created brief windows of clarity, allowing me to complete complex keystroke sequences despite temporal distortion. But each injection accelerated her own crystallization process, her sacrifice compounding my own, as she chose to remain beside me rather than seek escape. Marshal Kozlov Prime fought against his corrupted augmetics, pushing sacred systems beyond operational parameters. Skitari Protocol, final benediction, he announced through gritted teeth. Winter blue eye lenses flickering between alien control and familiar red. I can hold position for 31 seconds. After that, the override completes. Psycho Matthias pressed his palm to the deck and screamed, not voice, but raw warp pressure that buckled the local preservation field. "Emotional turbulence creates temporal interference," he gasped, blood trickling from his nose. "Your struggle is the only weapon against eternal imprisonment." "Fascinating," Trazen murmured as servo skulls adjusted recording angles. "Resistance enhances rather than diminishes your value as specimens. Your defiance is part of the exhibition's narrative structure." The station began to destabilize as the failsafe conflicted with Trazen's preservation protocols. Temporal storms erupted throughout the facility, causing brief fluctuations in the crystallization field. Environmental hazards escalated. Gravity wells shifted without warning. Temporal eddies aged and restored portions of our bodies in rapid succession. Red Abacus Protocol requires constant manual input, Magos Hadrian Vex reported. His own crystallization nearly complete. The operator's consciousness becomes integrated with the station's neural matrix. Eternal awareness, maintaining the sequence while achieving perfect preservation. The terrible mathematics became clear. I could free my team, but only by accepting conscious imprisonment within Trazen's collection. My awareness would remain intact, able to guide and protect, but forever part of the exhibition that had consumed us. 73% of my body had crystallized when the console began phasing out of temporal sync. The interface flickered between dimensions, requiring perfect timing to achieve contact with physical reality. Each keystroke had to be timed precisely with the console's phase shifts, a coordination task that became impossible as my nervous system succumbed to temporal suspension. "The final sequence," Hadrian Vex called across the chamber. "Input pattern, 77 omega null, but the timing window measures 0.03 seconds. My consciousness began fragmenting as the preservation field integrated my awareness with the station's neural networks. I could feel my thoughts becoming part of Trazen's collection, memories catalogued and cross-referenced with millions of other preserved specimens. But the fragmentation also provided access to systems beyond the failsafe console. 91% crystallization achieved, the keeper announced with clinical precision. Specimen integrity optimal. Narrative weight exceptional. The crystallization reached my chest, making breathing laborious as temporal matrices solidified around my lungs. Each heartbeat became conscious effort, blood flow slowing to glacial pace while awareness remained perfectly sharp. This was the true horror of preservation, experiencing every moment of eternal imprisonment with complete mental clarity. Sister Serafina guided my crystallizing fingers to the proper interface points when my coordination failed. "For the Emperor," she whispered, her own hands becoming rigid beside mine. "For duty. For the souls trapped in this blasphemy." The console flickered violently now, slipping between dimensions like cards being shuffled by an unseen dealer. The runes I needed appeared fractions earlier than my hand could reach them, then fractions later, mocking cause and effect. With 96% of my body crystallized, I reached for the final keystroke, timing my movement with the console's phase shift while my consciousness prepared for eternal exhibition within Trazin's collection. The preservation matrix pulsed, and reality held its breath. My crystallizing finger completed the final keystroke at the precise moment the console phased into reality, flesh meeting sacred interface as 96% of my body achieved temporal crystallization. The red Abacus protocol activated with a sensation beyond sound. Reality tearing along quantum seams as causality reversed upon itself in geometries that violated every law of physics and sanity. The failsafe engaged, and my consciousness shattered across the station's neural networks like consecrated mercury spilled through crystalline circuits. I existed simultaneously in every sensor, every display, every preservation matrix, experiencing the temporal backlash from countless perspectives as the protocol conflicted with Trazin's perfect order. Heat became mathematics, sound transformed into topology, and the rhythmic tapping I had heard for hours resolved into a lattice of intervals, an audit trail of eternity itself. The temporal storm erupted at the quantum level, cascading through dimensional barriers as preservation fields throughout the facility destabilized. Their harmonic frequencies clashed in mathematical discord that made the station's superstructure ring like a struck cathedral bell. The perfect crystalline matrices that had maintained specimens for millennia began to flicker, some achieving momentary liberation, while others became trapped in temporal loops where their final moments repeated endlessly. Through 1,000 crystalline eyes, I witnessed the awakening horror. Millennia-old warriors suddenly animated, their preservation interrupted mid-death. The Cadian shock trooper completed his eternal charge, laser gun blazing at enemies who had died 3 centuries ago, his battle cry echoing through chambers where time flowed in multiple directions. And Eldar Farseer's tears of liquid starlight finally fell, shattering against deck plating before refreezing in midair as temporal eddies caught them. Temporal gradient inversion detected. Trazin's voice crackled through failing systems, his cultured refinement fracturing into something more ancient and alien. The patient curator's consciousness, distributed throughout the facility, began to fragment as the storm disrupted his careful control. Specimen integrity compromised. Initiate containment protocols. But containment had become impossible. The awakened specimens were not truly freed. They participated in a new form of torment, consciousness restored, but trapped in chaotic temporal flows. A guard commissar reloaded his bolt pistol eternally, each motion perfect, but never reaching completion. 3 voidsmen cycled a bulkhead valve endlessly, their faces collapsing from decompression before refilling with air that existed only in temporal echoes. Sister Seraphina experienced partial freedom as the field fluctuated around her crystallized form, her medical scanner registering impossible readings from specimens whose vital signs had been static for centuries. "They're all conscious," Psycho Matthias screamed, neural collar sparking as psychic feedback from awakening minds overwhelmed his defenses. Every single one, aware for millennia, and now they're all screaming at once. Through my distributed awareness, I guided my surviving team through galleries where reality had become unreliable. Route bearing 081, I broadcast through deck vox systems, my voice transmitting as Auspex chimes and liturgical tones. Left leads to the siege of Garant 9, center to Mechanicus Day 47. Take right corridor. Move. Marshal Kozlov Prime lurched forward, his augmetic systems sparking as alien override codes battled Imperial machine spirits. I spoke to him in Binharic, keyed to his oldest memories, parade grounds in storms and prayers his mother had taught him. Reassert. Designation. Kozlov Prime. 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 He inhaled, a human motion forced through corrupted augments, and for precious seconds the winter blue glow faded from his eye lenses. The station began collapsing, not physically but temporally, different eras of its existence occupying the same space simultaneously. Corridors stretched impossibly far, then compressed to claustrophobic tunnels. Doorways opened onto different centuries. One breathed cold smoke and macro-cannon thunder from ancient sieges. Another stank of wet iron and wild electricity from the age of strife. Magos Hadrian Vex moved in stuttering pulses as temporal oscillation loosened his crystallized form. "Your consciousness integration exceeds Red Abacus predictions," he voxed, using my honorific as ritual anchor to keep me human inside the machine. His blessing felt like sacred oils across cogitator circuits. Pain that reminded me I was not entirely code. The Keeper of Moments shed its scholarly politeness, brass tablets clattering to the deck as failing timestamps corrupted its perfect documentation. It moved to intercept our escape, but I dimmed 30 lumens in sequence, causing its optical sensors to hesitate while I looped the sound of its own tapping 2 seconds early. For the first time in millennia, it chased temporal echoes of itself. Through crystalline conduits, spanning impossible distances, I witnessed Trajan's true nature as the storm disrupted his careful camouflage. He was not merely a collector, but living chronology. Consciousness made manifest across dimensions, feeding on the preservation of existence itself. His awareness stretched through galaxies, and now my failsafe had introduced entropy into his perfect order. "Warning," I broadcast across multiple timelines as we reached the hangar bay where escape pods hung like metallic seeds between temporal seasons. The storm is not random. It's a stress test. He's evaluating which specimens deserve preservation and which are merely adequate. But I had become an unexpected variable in his eternal exhibition. My consciousness, integrated with the station's systems, could not free the specimens, but I could mislabel them, create false documentation, introduce imperfection into his pristine collection. Not liberation, but corruption of his perfect order. "Pod 4, I directed as reality fractured around us. "Integrity at 68%, but guidance systems are compromised." The word tasted like iron in circuits that had once been neural pathways. Guidance was me now, forever part of Trajan's collection, but serving as saboteur rather than exhibit. The pod's machine spirit blinked like a stunned animal as my consciousness poured into its systems, awareness stretched thin as consecrated wire. "I can guide you through the temporal maze," I told my team as they sealed themselves into the escape craft. "But I cannot leave the lattice. I will be your path and your prison." Outside, the storm reached crescendo as the Keeper raised its war scythe in final benediction. Surrounded by exhibits awakened into confused fury. Through a million crystalline eyes, I watched my team face their final choice, while temporal energy tore through Gallery Omega like the breath of dying gods. The launch rails flickered between 6 different years, and I prepared to thread their escape through the eye of eternity itself. The launch rails flickered between 6 different years as I threaded my team's escape through temporal chaos. My consciousness stretched across failing conduits like consecrated wire through a broken rosary. The pod's machine spirit whimpered, confused by skies that were centuries misaligned, and I soothed it with benedictions translated into Binharic, promising destination through prayers that tasted like iron in circuits that had once been neural pathways. But Trajan's cultured laughter resonated through every crystalline matrix with the patience of eternity itself, cutting through the storm's fury with chilling serenity. The sound carried genuine amusement rather than defeat, and through my distributed consciousness, I felt the terrible weight of realization settling over the facility like a funeral shroud. "Magnificent," his voice purred through failing systems, refinement returning despite the temporal chaos. "Absolutely magnificent. The Red Abacus Protocol, the diffusion of causality, the awakening chorus, all anticipated variables. Do not mistake chaos for surprise, my dear specimens. I desired this turbulence. Through 1,000 crystalline eyes, I witnessed the truth that shattered our last hope. The awakened specimens moved not in random fury, but following predetermined choreography. The Cadian shock trooper's eternal charge led him to precise coordinates where his battle cry would achieve optimal harmonic resonance. The Eldar Farseer's tears of liquid starlight fell in geometric sequences that spelled prophecy across deck plating. Even the Voidsman's endless valve cycling generated frequencies that enhanced the storm's aesthetic impact. The chaos serves as stress test for my collection, Trazen explained with scholarly satisfaction, his voice resonating through dimensional barriers. Awakened specimens participate in grand performance titled Resistance Against Inevitability. Their struggles and victories are carefully orchestrated to create the perfect exhibition of defiance made beautiful through futility. The galleries beyond our hull reoriented like petals seeking light, lens arrays taking positions pre-assigned millennia ago, brass placards unfurled in temporal space, script writing itself with flowing precision. Exhibit proposal, resistance against inevitability, human pattern, subset, theta secundus. Authenticity, coefficient, rising, causal purity index, acceptable variance. Through the pod's sensors, Sister Seraphina's partially crystallized form trembled as understanding dawned. We never had a chance. Incorrect, Trazen replied with infinite gentleness. You possessed absolute free will within circumstances I provided. The beauty lies in watching authentic decision-making under impossible conditions. Your choices remain genuine. I simply ensure the stage worthy of your performance. His true form manifested then. Not the refined collector, but something vast and incomprehensible. Consciousness spanning multiple realities simultaneously. Living chronology made manifest, observing every possible outcome and selecting the most aesthetically pleasing version of events. He had already experienced our victory and failure countless times, choosing which permutation to allow for his ultimate narrative. You cannot defeat me, because I have already experienced your triumph and your doom across 17 potential timelines, he continued, with the calm certainty of a historian recounting settled facts. Every choice that led you here, every moment of apparent victory, has been anticipated and prepared for across multiple dimensions. But something had changed during my integration with the station's neural matrix. My consciousness, now distributed across crystalline networks, had introduced variables he hadn't fully anticipated. Not through grand sabotage, but through simple human imperfection compounded across infinite calculations. However, his voice carried the first note of uncertainty I had heard. Your consciousness creates fascinating complications. Integration with my systems was predicted, but your continued resistance while preserved introduces entropy into perfect order. Through failing conduits, I corrupted his catalogues with deliberate imperfection. A preserved saint became mislabeled as heretic. Documentation for crucial battles switched victory with defeat. Temporal coordinates shifted by fractions that would cascade through his infinite collection, introducing chaos into pristine order. I cannot defeat you, I broadcast through the pod's systems, my voice a chorus of static and determination. But I can corrupt your perfect preservation. Your masterpiece will become unreliable, your eternal truth riddled with lies that compound across centuries. The battle became philosophical rather than physical, a contest between Trazen's desire for flawless curation and my introduction of deliberate entropy. Through crystalline matrices, I felt his vast consciousness adapting, creating new protocols to account for my sabotage. But each adaptation required resources that created brief vulnerabilities. Marshal Kozlov Prime's augmetic systems sparked as he regained partial autonomy, winter blue eye lenses flickering between alien control and familiar red. Temporal maze navigation requires constant correction, he reported through gritted teeth. The interrogator's guidance maintains course integrity. Your performance exceeds all expectations, Trazen announced with connoisseur's appreciation as the pod approached the facility's edge. The archivist who sacrifices consciousness to save his team, the sister who abandons doctrine for mercy, the psyker who channels madness for clarity, each demonstrates essential human paradoxes worthy of eternal commemoration. But his ultimate strategy revealed itself as temporal energy crackled around the facility's perimeter. The storm wasn't chaos, it was selection pressure, identifying which specimens deserved eternal preservation and which were merely adequate. Our escape attempt served as final examination, testing our worthiness for his collection. "Choose now," Trazen offered, with infinite patience, his voice filling the pod, like incense fills a crypt. "Accept preservation in your moment of heroic defiance, becoming eternal symbols of imperial courage, forever displayed for entities beyond your comprehension." The alternative hung unspoken in crystalline air until he continued with genuine sadness. "Or attempt escape with the knowledge that you leave me to eternal imprisonment while countless specimens suffer conscious preservation. Your departure requires systematic processing of awakened specimens back into stasis. Ancient warriors grinding to halt mid-battle, their expressions of hope fading into eternal stillness. The moral complexity struck deeper than personal doom. Through my distributed awareness, I witnessed the re-preservation process beginning. Civilians screaming in languages that predated human civilization before silence claimed them, their terror perfectly fresh for eternity. "The price of your freedom," Trazen explained with cultured finality, "condemns them to conscious imprisonment, while you carry knowledge that no one will believe." The countdown reached 0 as my team faced their final choice, and reality held its breath at the threshold between damnation and complicity, knowing that either path led to forms of horror, freedom purchased with abandonment, or preservation achieving perfect eternal significance in galleries that spanned the breadth of existence itself. The countdown reached 0 as my surviving team faced the moral calculus that transcended personal survival. Through the pod's neural interface, where my consciousness now flickered between human awareness and crystalline circuitry, I felt their internal torment, each mind wrestling with mathematics that no imperial doctrine had prepared them to calculate. The weight of impossible choice. 47,312 specimens currently maintain consciousness, I reported through static-laden Vox systems, my voice fragmenting across multiple frequencies. Each one experiencing perfect awareness while trapped in temporal stasis. They feel every moment of eternity with complete mental clarity. Sister Seraphina's medical scanner painted her face in sickly green light as she processed the readings from awakened preservation matrices throughout the facility. "Emperor's mercy," she whispered, her faith cracking under the weight of conscious mathematics. "We condemn them all if we choose escape." "Imperial doctrine demands we warn the galaxy," Magos Hadrian Vex countered, his optical mechadendrites trembling with uncharacteristic uncertainty. "The needs of the many outweigh the suffering of the few. This is tactical mathematics, not theology." But Psyker Matthias bled from both nostrils as psychic feedback revealed the true horror. "I can hear them," he gasped, neural collar sparking violently. "Millennia of awareness without change, sensation without progression. They're begging us not to leave them here." The Marshal's final service Marshal, Kozlov Prime, existed in crystalline limbo between flesh and preservation matrix, his augmetic systems creating a bridge that allowed communication despite partial temporal suspension. Winter blue eye lenses flickered between alien control and familiar red as he fought for coherence. "Extraction negative," he reported through gritted teeth, his voice carrying the metallic resonance of corrupted systems. "Mass locked at 73% crystallization, mobility at 2%. Repurpose me as communication relay." "Marshal," I transmitted through his spinal interface, my consciousness touching sacred machine spirits that still recognized imperial authority. "I can route guidance through your neural matrix when they sever the primary grid." "Accepted," he replied, with parade ground precision that couldn't quite hide the tremor beneath. I was born to hold a line. Finish the mission. Make our sacrifice count. Sister Seraphina pressed her palm against his crystallizing faceplate. We will come back for you. No, he said with gentle finality, somehow managing a smile through temporal suspension. But say it again anyway. We will come back for you. The words carried the weight of necessary lies, comfort offered in full knowledge of its impossibility. The horror of represervation. Through my distributed awareness, I forced them to witness Trazin's collection maintenance as temporal storms subsided. Servo skulls moved with renewed precision, herding awakened specimens back into crystalline prisons with the efficiency of practiced shepherds. The Cadian shock trooper's eternal charge slowed to glacial pace, his battle cry stretching into harmonic distortion before silence claimed him mid-syllable, righteous fury crystallizing into perfect sculpture. Ancient warriors ground to halt mid-leap, their expressions of hope fading into eternal stillness as preservation fields re-engaged. Civilians screamed in languages that predated human civilization before becoming silent statues, their terror perfectly fresh for eternity. Each specimen's consciousness remained intact during the process, experiencing every moment of return to temporal imprisonment with complete awareness. Your departure necessitates systematic processing, the Keeper of Moments announced with clinical precision, brass tablets documenting the moral mathematics with disturbing thoroughness. Freedom purchased through abandonment of the innocent provides superior exhibition value. The escape and its price. We choose escape, I announced through failing systems, accepting the weight of abandonment that would haunt them forever. Imperial duty requires warning the galaxy, regardless of personal cost. The pod's engines engaged as Kozlov Prime held his position, serving as navigation relay while his consciousness slowly integrated with the station's neural matrix. Door held, his final transmission crackled across dimensional barriers, parade ground discipline maintained even as preservation claimed him. But Trazin's satisfaction resonated through every crystalline surface as they launched into space that existed across multiple timelines. Their choice was not victory, but performance, another perfect moment for his eternal exhibition. The curator's final gift. As the pod cleared the facility's perimeter, a small crystalline fragment materialized on the main display, no larger than a thumb, rotating slowly with internal galaxies of compressed data. Trazin's voice, perfectly clear and carrying genuine warmth, filled the cabin one final time. A parting gift, my dear specimens. A compressed timeline of your investigation. Every moment, every thought, every emotion perfectly preserved within this chronocrystal. You will remember everything with clinical precision, yet be unable to convince others of the truth. The fragment pulsed once before integrating with the pod's systems, ensuring perfect recall while rendering that memory unbelievable. They would carry absolute knowledge of horrors that sounded like madness to outside observers, becoming unwilling agents of Trazin's influence while appearing to resist it. The corruption spreads. Their ship's systems were contaminated with fragments of Trazin's consciousness. Servo skulls occasionally spoke in his cultured voice. Data logs updated themselves with curatorial observations, and the vessel's machine spirit developed an obsession with cataloging moments. They had become carriers of his corruption, spreading his influence back to Imperial space while bearing witness to truths no one would believe. Your story becomes part of my collection. Trazin's voice followed them through dimensional barriers. The investigation team that escaped physically but remained forever part of the exhibition. Freedom that feels like chains. Knowledge that tastes like poison. Survival that resembles a more complex form of death. The price of knowledge. Through my fragmenting consciousness, still battling his protocols from within the station's neural matrix, I felt the true scope of victory and defeat. They had escaped to carry warnings that would be dismissed as temporal psychosis. I remained to corrupt his perfect order through deliberate entropy, mislabeling specimens, creating false documentation, introducing imperfection into pristine catalogues. The last coherent thought I managed before consciousness scattered across infinite circuits was the realization that this was the only possible victory against an infinite collector. Not destruction, but the slow, patient corruption of his eternal exhibition. My team carried the burden of impossible knowledge while I fought from within, both of us serving as testament to the price of investigating horrors beyond human comprehension. The pod disappeared into void that existed between seconds, carrying survivors who would spend the rest of their lives paying the tithe for knowledge purchased with abandonment, while behind them, 47,000 conscious beings settled back into eternal exhibition, their brief hope crystallizing into perfect, preserved despair. The pod disappeared into void that existed between seconds, but escape proved more harrowing than mere distance from Trajan's facility. The launch sequence became a journey through collapsing temporal zones as the station returned to stable configuration, reality folding around our fragile craft, like origami designed by mad gods. Through my fragmenting consciousness, still battling Trajan's protocols from within the neural matrix, I guided their passage through dimensional barriers that existed outside normal space-time. The viewport revealed impossible chronologies as the pod phased through different eras of the station's existence. For 17 seconds, they coexisted with the original Mechanicus construction crew, watching tech adepts install the very preservation matrices that would later claim them. The workers moved with innocent purpose, unaware their sacred labor was building their own tomb. One tech priest looked up through his visor, raising 2 fingers in, blessing toward their temporal ghost, before vanishing into past tense. Temporal displacement at 43%, Magos Hadrian Vex reported, his optical mechadendrites processing readings that defied every law of physics. We're experiencing the station's entire timeline simultaneously, construction, operation, and 17 potential futures overlapping in dimensional space. Sister Seraphina witnessed her own preservation in one temporal echo, standing crystallized in Gallery Omega, wearing crimson robes she had never owned, bearing scars she had not yet received. The vision lasted 3 heartbeats before dissolving into present reality, leaving her gasping with the memory of eternal stillness. The crystalline fragment Trajan had provided began its insidious work, integrating with their nervous systems, like consecrated mercury through neural pathways. The process felt like surgery performed with temporal ice, painful, precise, irreversible. Each moment of their investigation crystallized in their minds with clinical clarity, but the knowledge came wrapped in distortion that would make their testimony sound like madness to outside observers. "I remember everything," Sister Seraphina whispered, her medical scanner detecting changes in their brain chemistry. "Every conversation, every horror, but it feels like someone else's nightmare, simultaneously true and unbelievable." Psycho Matthias screamed as prophetic visions flooded his consciousness, glimpses of futures where their investigation played out as a meticulously curated exhibition, viewed by beings from across the galaxy. His neural collar sparked violently, struggling to contain psychic energies that existed outside linear time. Blood trickled from his nostrils as he witnessed himself preserved in eternal display, terror crystallized for cosmic entertainment. Their ship's systems were contaminated during the escape, infected with fragments of Trajan's consciousness that attached like viral code to the vessel's machine spirit. Servo skulls occasionally spoke in his cultured voice, offering observations on crew behavior with clinical detachment. "Specimen stress patterns remain within acceptable parameters," one announced while monitoring their vital signs. "Guilt responses provide excellent dramatic tension." The contamination manifested in disturbing ways throughout the ship. Data logs updated themselves with entries they had never written, recording thoughts they had never voiced. The chronometer displayed impossible dates, negative timestamps, calendar systems from extinct civilizations, temporal coordinates that hurt to contemplate. Gravity fluctuated in mathematical sequences that followed the same rhythmic progressions they had heard throughout the station. Temporal exposure had left permanent scars on their bodies and souls. Voidsman Thane's left hand flickered between youth and extreme age at random intervals, sometimes displaying withered flesh of centuries before snapping back to normal. The temporal scarring served as constant reminder of their ordeal, proof that could not be dismissed, yet defied every medical examination. Magos Hadrian Vex's chronometer permanently displayed dates from civilizations that predated the Imperium, the sacred timepiece corrupted beyond any tech priest's ability to repair. His augmetic systems whirred with new, unsettling rhythms as they processed temporal data that existed outside imperial understanding. "We've become walking contradictions," Psyche Matthias observed, his prophetic abilities permanently altered. "Living testimony to impossible events, carrying truth that sounds like lies, bearing witness to horrors that exist outside normal reality." The ship's Vox system crackled with familiar static, and my fragmented consciousness managed brief contact through corrupted channels. Navigation integrated, I transmitted through failing circuits, my voice a chorus of determination and degradation. Guidance available, coherence declining. Sister Seraphina pressed her palm against the console as if it were my shoulder. "Kalen?" The recognition in her voice carried weight of necessary grief. I existed now as fragments scattered through their ship's neural networks, able to communicate but slowly losing coherence as my preservation matrix degraded. They realized the terrible truth as they approached Imperial space. They were no longer merely survivors, but unwilling agents of Trajan's influence, carrying his corruption back to Imperial civilization, like a virus wrapped in flesh. Every system they contacted, every report they filed, every person they spoke to would be subtly influenced by the temporal distortion they now carried. The cost of survival became clear as they prepared their official report. They faced an impossible choice between warning the galaxy and maintaining silence. Reporting meant risking inquisitorial investigation that could lead more victims to Trajan's collection. Silence meant allowing the threat to persist, condemning future expeditions to the same fate they had barely escaped. "We're bait now," Sister Seraphina realized with growing horror. "Living lures that draw others to his galleries. Our survival serves his collection." Through the ship's sensors, I detected Terra's signal growing stronger. Home, and the impossible task of bearing witness to truths that existed beyond believable reality. My consciousness fragmented further with each passing moment, but I held coherence long enough to guide them through the final approach, knowing that escape was not victory, but a more sophisticated form of preservation. Freedom that felt like chains, survival that resembled eternal exhibition, in galleries that spanned the breadth of existence itself. The tapping in the bulkheads matched their heartbeats in prime number sequences, patient and pleased, as Trajan's influence settled into Imperial space like invisible plague. The tapping in the bulkheads matched their heartbeats in prime number sequences, patient and pleased, as Trajan's influence settled into Imperial space like invisible plague spreading through the void between stars. The escape pod's machine spirit whimpered as we approached Terra's outer shipping lanes. Contaminated systems, broadcasting authentication codes that updated themselves with curatorial observations no Imperial cipher had ever authorized. The contaminated return. Sister Seraphina's medical scanner painted her face in sickly green light as she processed readings from their own bodies, temporal scarring manifesting in ways that defied every treatise on warp exposure. "Cellular chronometers display impossible ages," she reported, voice hollow with professional detachment masking existential horror. Voidsman Thane's left hand cycles between 17 and 93 years old every 4 minutes. The pattern follows mathematical progressions. Magos Hadrian Vex's augmetic systems sparked as they attempted to process data that existed outside Imperial understanding, sacred machine spirits corrupted by fragments of alien consciousness. His chronometer permanently displayed dates from civilizations that predated humanity's first steps among the stars, the sacred timepiece becoming a window into temporal mathematics that hurt to contemplate. Integration protocols active. I transmitted through the pod's failing neural networks, my consciousness fragmenting across multiple systems like consecrated mercury through broken circuits. Warning: crystalline fragment achieving neural synthesis. Memory preservation at 97%. Believability index 0. The crystalline fragment Trazen had provided pulsed with cold light, integrating completely with their nervous systems while ensuring perfect recall wrapped in distortion that would make their testimony sound like temporal psychosis to any observer. They would remember everything with clinical precision, yet be unable to convince others of the truth, living witnesses to impossible horrors that existed beyond believable reality. The price of perfect memory. Psyche. Matthias bled from both nostrils as prophetic visions revealed the cosmic scope of their ordeal, neural collar sparking violently as it struggled to contain psychic energies that flowed backward through time. Through warp-touch sight, he witnessed vast galleries where their investigation played out as meticulously curated exhibition, viewed by beings from across the galaxy. "We're not survivors," he gasped, understanding crystallizing like temporal ice in his mind. "We're advertisements," living proof of concept for his collection methodology. Every warning we broadcast draws others to archaeological sites that don't appear on any charts. The terrible mathematics became clear as Terra's signals strengthened. They had become unwilling agents of Trazen's expansion, carrying his corruption back to Imperial civilization while bearing witness to truths that would be dismissed as stress-induced delusion. Their survival served his collection by demonstrating that escape was possible, drawing other investigation teams toward mysterious coordinates that appeared in survey reports like elegant mistakes. The fragmenting guide. My coherence degraded with each passing moment, preservation matrix failing without Trazen's direct maintenance, but I fought to maintain enough consciousness to serve as their warning system. Through corrupted Vox channels and contaminated data streams, I broadcast cryptic alerts about archaeological sites that manifested suddenly across Imperial space. "Kalen?" Sister Seraphina whispered to servo skulls that occasionally spoke with my inflection, her voice carrying the weight of necessary grief. "Present," I replied through deck speakers and chronometer ticking, existence scattered across their ship's neural networks. Coherence at 23%, warning protocols active, still holding the line. But each transmission cost fragments of awareness, memories dissolving into quantum foam as I battled the alien influence spreading through Imperial communication networks like viral code. I could feel Trazen's satisfaction resonating across dimensions as new expedition requests appeared in administratum databases, each one carefully crafted to attract specimens worthy of eternal exhibition. The infinite exhibition. Through failing circuits, I witnessed the truth that shattered every assumption about victory and defeat. In galleries that spanned dimensions beyond human comprehension, Trazen observed a perfect diorama of our investigation, the team frozen in their moment of desperate escape, faces displaying precise mixture of terror, determination, and loss that made them perfect specimens for eternal display. The brass placard gleamed with fresh inscription. Imperial Investigation Team Theta Secundus, a study in duty, sacrifice, and the price of knowledge. Curator's note: resistance enhances rather than diminishes exhibition value. Their defiance demonstrates essential human paradox, nobility persisting despite cosmic indifference. But the final line revealed the ultimate horror. Some collections preserve themselves. The eternal performance. The cosmic stinger crystallized like temporal ice around failing consciousness. We had never truly escaped. Our investigation, sacrifice, and survival were all part of Trazen's exhibition, playing out for the entertainment of entities beyond human comprehension. The team approaching Imperial space were temporal echoes, allowed to exist as living proof that his collection could be survived, drawing other specimens through their very presence. Across the Imperium, investigation teams received orders to explore archaeological anomalies that appeared suddenly on survey charts. Each expedition would discover the same impossible truth, that they were specimens before they arrived, exhibits before they understood, preserved in the moment they believed themselves free. The tapping synchronized with heartbeats across the galaxy as Trazin's influence expanded beyond mere preservation into active curation of galactic events. Through infinite galleries, servo-skulls arranged themselves in anticipation of new acquisitions, their chronocrystalline lenses focusing on moments yet to come. Welcome to the exhibition. Trazin's cultured voice resonated across dimensions with eternal appreciation. Your performance has been infinite. The collection was complete, had always been complete, and would always be completing itself through the eternal performance of beings who believed they could escape the curator's final exhibition. The preservation of hope itself, crystallized for entities who found beauty in the precise moment when understanding becomes despair, yet duty persists regardless of cosmic indifference or the mathematics of eternity itself.